All right, everybody, welcome to Tent Talk Conversations. I am so glad that we are here together. And this is a very, very special conversation that we're going to have today. But before we get started with that, I want to make sure that you subscribe to my channel right here. Hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss anything that's going on here at Nancy McCready Ministries. But now let's get right to it. I'm so glad, I always say this, I love introducing my friends to my friends, and I am so glad to have my dear friend, Tina Kelley, with me today, and we're going to have a very strong conversation. I believe it'll probably be one of the richest ones that we've ever had, simply because of the caliber of person that Tina is. We have a lot of rich history together, and so I just want to introduce her to you. So here is my friend, Tina Kelley.
Well, hello, everybody, and hello, Nancy. So I am so happy to be part of this podcast with you. It is my absolute privilege to be here with you, and I am looking forward to our conversation, because we always have some really nice ones. So.
Yes, we do. We have nice ones. We've had a few get a little spicy, Yeah. We talk about things because these are real life conversations, and Tina and I have come through a lot of real life together. So let me say and introduce it to you this way. Tina is our dear friend. Tina is the board member, along with my husband, Win McCready, and helps to make up the board of directors of Nancy McCready Ministries. And she is also the lead principal at Clewiston Middle School in Clewiston, Florida. So, oh my goodness, just the introduction alone, that is like 20 plus years of living right there, where we've known each other, walked together, and I am so glad that we're going to be able to share many things with you today. There's a specific reason why I wanted Tina to be with us today. Here in the month of August. It's August 2024. And as many of you know, we are headed back to school. People are beginning to gear up. There are issues to be addressed. There are so many things that are going on when we hit these cycles of time, when people begin to gear up to go back into school. But from Tina's point of view, I think this is going to proved to be very encouraging to a large swath of people, to educators, to parents, to students, to anyone who walks in leadership, anyone who's leading, anyone who may even feel a bit overwhelmed by the cultural issues of the day. I think some of the things we're going to talk about today are going to be very, very helpful. So, Tina, I want us to launch out. And because we do have such a rich history and it covers such a big swath of time, but I want us to look at in 2019, when you left Sealy, Texas, okay? And though I knew I was going to miss you, I so wanted you to follow the will of God for your life. I said, okay, do it, whatever he's put in your heart to do. But I want you to just take and jump off from 2019, when you, on assignment, God took you back home into Florida from Texas, and what that was like for you as you began to learn that you were going to need to address some of the tensions that had actually been going on in life as you were maturing and growing into who he'd made you to be. Just share a little bit about what that part of your journey was like in 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Nancy said, I grew up in Clewiston, Florida, and really knew at an early age that, I had a call of God on my life, and was very fortunate to have people around me, mentors, my spiritual father around me. So I literally started, if you want, in ministry, probably at the age of 13 years old. I played the piano at the church, and really had been on the platform every single Sunday, really somewhere in the world since I was 13 years old, and did a lot of, my heart was missions. I heard the story of Amy Carmichael as an
Oh,
8-year-old
wow.
girl
Yeah.
in children's church. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just want to tell people about Jesus, right? And so really, at that time in my life, in my early 20s, I just thought, man, this is my lane. This is what I'm called to. I'm called to full-time ministry. But at the same time, I was teaching full-time, right? I've been an elementary teacher, middle school teacher, and so an instructional coach, um, lots of experience in education, which I was also very passionate about. So it led me to a point in my life many times, I felt like I would come to a crossroad where maybe I need to choose one. Maybe I need to give up teaching and education and just, go into full-time ministry. And then the other aspect of that is like, well, no, maybe I just need to give on, maybe I've missed this, and maybe I'm not called, to minister to others. Maybe I just need to, head into just education, right? And I look back now and see, man, how much internal tension that caused me many different times. That Nancy's heard a lot about this. We've had many conversations about it. But in 2019, the Lord really brought me to a place where as simple as it sounds, I was kind of at that crossroads again. Like I knew transition was coming in my life, and that tension was there again, right? And kind of two things happened. One thing was my spiritual father. He just said to me, he said, Tina, the grace of God is going to be in the decision you make. Number one. So I just want to encourage somebody, if you're trying to make a decision right
That's
now,
right.
don't let it stifle you, because God is with you. He's not up there waiting to smack you around if you make the bad. In your mind, we make it about, am I making the right or wrong decision? And the reality of it is, the Lord is just saying, hey, I'm with you, right? You make the decision and I'm with you, and the grace is going to be there, right? So
Not to
that's
be paralyzed, right? Not to let that tension bring you to such a place you can't really go fully in either direction. And
right.
and maybe not at this moment, but here in a second, you can also address that sometimes this belief that it's not really important what you're doing unless it's at the church.
Right.
I would like for you to address that. So just keep going, but I want to make sure we talk about that.
Yeah. Because our idea of ministry was, it was, for me anyway, I speak for myself, a lot of it was that, you got to be doing something at the church, right? It's got to be something at the church. Still knowing that I had strong influence with the students in my classrooms and things like that. So 2019, the second thing that happened was, it was like the Lord just really spoke to me. It was just like, Tina, you don't have to choose a lane, right?
Wow.
You can flow in many lanes. You can flow, there's multi lanes, right? You can flow in both of these lanes. You have one life, and both of these things are very strong in your life, right? And so that was such kind of an eye-opening thing for me, and it also allowed me to be able just to move forward and make the decision, right? So I moved back to Clewiston, is affectionately called America's sweetest town, and that's because we are high agriculture area and a lot of sugarcane. But I found out pretty quickly that might not be America's sweetest town, right? Even though it was the town I grew up in. And I came back, and I actually was hired at the school that I had left when I moved to Texas. And so I was hired on an administrative position. I was hired on as what was referred to as a dean at the time. And really, that's just a four-letter word for, I was the person that dealt with discipline and chaos pretty much all day long. And so I
Wow.
realized pretty quickly that this was not the school, that I had left back in 2003. And a lot of things had shifted, a lot of things had changed. And to be honest with you, the first few months that I was home, I was like, what in the world? right? You start going.
Major reality check. Reality check, reality check.
But there was a lot of lack of structure, a lot of difficult things and challenges that were happening at the school. And there was a fight pretty much every single day. And I'm not talking about, he thumped me. There was serious fights, a lot of chaos, a lot of disorder. Florida gives schools a grade, and so we were actually a D school, um, that's not a good thing to be, right? And so we had been a D school for 2 years in a row. And so the state of Florida, the Department of Education was in basically saying, you guys got to get it together, or we're gonna take over this school. And so in a matter of, I started work in July 2019. Somewhere around October, the principal left and I became the assistant principal. And then you fast forward to January of 2020. Keep that year in mind, 2020, right? January of 2020, I had the awesome privilege of becoming the principal at my school. And little did I know, it's kind of like, okay, congratulations, you're the principal of the school. It's a D school. The state of Florida is in here. And by the way, in just a few short weeks, all your kids are going to be sent home because of a worldwide pandemic, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, so there we have it. And so I actually
So
started
just layer upon layer upon
later.
layer. I mean, just that right there. Going back in, right? And I know you love your town, but when you say, well, it might not have been the sweetest, it's also as you weren't going back as the same person that you left. So therefore, when you began to enter in, you knew there were things that not set against you per se, but resistant to any change agent probably that would come in. Anyone that's being sent in on assignment to really be a change agent
Right.
simply by obeying the Lord and just getting in your lane and being in your lane. So things were different even from just as you entered back in, they were different. And then positions changed. The whole world changed when COVID came in, right? So that is quite a vortex of influences, situations, circumstances. But did you find that God had actually been building in you, though, to make you the kind of person that he could send right in?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because I like you said, you go back. I was not the same person that left
that's right.
in 2003. I say this a lot. I say life came to me, right, in Sealy, Texas, and life with a capital L. I've been a Christian most of my life, but yet true discipleship happened in my life, right? And I came back knowing the Father in a way that I did not know him. When I left, I knew myself better, right? I knew
That's right.
that more important than knowing myself, I knew the Father, right? And I knew the assignment that he had on my life. And so when you come into a situation like that, right, you don't come in a status quo, right? Even
That's
though, I mean, I have great friends here, my family is here. I'm so blessed to be home. I mean, just loved every aspect of that. But at the same time, there is an awareness, right? There is a sobering aspect of it where
very
you're like, okay, obviously, we've got some work to do here, right? And it was across the board, right? So for me, it was more of and a lot of times, when I would have conversations with some, one of the first things that I did was I knew that I had to build a really strong administrative team around me, because I knew this is not a one person,
that's
um,
right.
I need people, right? God gives people for our lives, right? And strategically, um, I just knew that one of the key things I had to do was get strong people around me, right? And people um, that, as part of being a leader, is having the wisdom to know what you don't know, right? And to know what you're not good at.
Well,
And to,
because even though we know that you were sent in on assignment and God had been building in you, that doesn't mean that you were saying that you had everything together and were all there, but enough had shifted to where you were willing to believe God. You were willing to courageously step out of any status quo and
right,
step into that assignment and then begin to, grow to even new depths. And a part of that is, I am not a one woman show here.
exactly.
We're going to build a team. This is a huge part of being able to really, take the mountain, if you will, is, it's in me, but it's beyond me.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, speaking of, the mountain, that was one of the key scriptures that the Lord had given me when I came back. It was, I believe it's in Joshua 14. And where Caleb originally had been one of the spies that had gone into the promised land, and he was one of the two spies that came back at a very young age, and had said, hey, this is a good place. I mean, this is a land flowing with milk and honey, right? And but he also recognized, yes, there's giants in the land, right? And then you fast forward 40 years later, when they had actually crossed over into what the Bible refers to, as their promised land, and assignments, were being handed out. And
Yes, yes.
and the assignment came to Caleb, and Caleb said, hey, I was young, now I'm old, because I kind of felt like that. I was like, oh my goodness, at the time when most people are counting down to retirement, right?
That's
I'm 30 years in, right? And at the most, when people
wow.
are coming down to, okay, I'm going in this program and I'm retiring in 5 years. I mean, there were people at my campus that could literally tell me, I've got 48 months, 7 days, and 26 hours left, and I'm out of here, right? And so a lot of times I was going, oh my gosh, I'm young and now I'm old, right? And so
But
but
I know that with that, there was a vigor that God gave you, that you were
absolutely
literally putting your foot on your mountain, and there
right.
was a compelling from within. Yeah.
Very much so, right? Because, Caleb went on to say, he goes, look, I'm stronger now than I was even back then. And he basically said, hey, give me the mountain. And there was such a compelling that came over me that I was like, yeah, let's go. Give me the mountain,
Good.
Lord.
That's
Give me
nice.
the mountain, and the willingness. The Bible says, another way of looking at it, the Bible says, ask of me and I will give you the nations,
That's
as your inheritance. And
right.
so this was a situation where there was, with the clarity of, I'm multi-lane here, with the clarity that I don't have to choose, I don't have to have one leg in, one leg out. I don't have to be focused on this and focused on that. This is my lane. Came also that strong conviction, that clarity, that empowering, grace that, yeah, let's do this. Let's take this, Lord, And another key scripture that the Lord had said to me, because it wasn't a piece of cake, right? It was not a
Oh,
piece of
it
cake.
sure wasn't.
Another the scripture that the Lord said to me, because I just kept, there were so many days that I would go home and I would say, like, God, I just don't know. Like, do you see what's happening here? You know, I think I'd shared with Nancy earlier, just over the summer, I cleaned out some files from like 2019. And I started looking back through it, right? Because we're 5 years later, and I started looking back through stuff and going like, oh my gosh, like that really happened,
Yes.
And I don't mean necessarily a positive way. I'm like, you know what? This could have been a Lifetime movie. This
That's
could have
right.
been a Netflix series, the good, bad, and the ugly of it. But it was a great reminder to me,
Mm.
right? The faithfulness of God. And so, but anyway, there were days that I would go home, and another scripture that the Lord gave me is this, like, in Matthew, where God says, if you say to this mountain, right? If you say to this mountain, be cast down, right? Whatever you say is going to happen. And so the Lord just began to speak to me about how important that it was that I was in agreement with him and what he was saying,
Yes.
right,
Oh,
about this assignment. And my words had to align with him about what he was saying about this mountain,
that's
you know,
right.
and so,
Yeah, because saying to this mountain, this is not some formula. This is not
yeah,
some hyped up. This is like the Lord has truly spoken something to you. I mean, you're living on his words. And then when you say them, right? I mean, that is different. So to me, that's like the double-edged sword. It's like he says it, you say it, and it goes forward. And that doesn't mean everything poof happens, but you know we're going in inch by inch, acre by acre, day by day, problem by problem, right? Because a part of going in and taking the land, when you talk about Caleb, is that there were giants in the land, right? There were giants that were there, but
absolutely.
his attitude was, if the Lord delights in us, they're going to be like bread for us.
Yeah,
So what's the aspect of the delight that the Lord has? He's written it down. You're not making it all happen. You're agreeing with him. He says, I've already taken care of this, but I need somebody to go in agreement with me. And let's actually go in and begin to do this.
I think part of that was that, you know, God loves my school,
Yes,
right? And part of the delight was like, this is not about me, even though there were things that happened um, that felt very personal, right? Because
yes.
they're actually happening to you, right?
That's
You're
right.
living it. You're
That's
living it
right.
every single day.
That's
But
right.
you have to, the delight of the Lord was that, for me, there's a whole generation here, people tell me I can be a little dramatic, but so this might sound dramatic, but there's a whole generation at stake here,
That's correct.
right?
That is
And
absolutely correct.
there is the whole generation at stake here. And, if God thinks they're worth fighting for, right, then I think they're worth fighting for, right?
That's correct.
I think
Because
they're
you
worth,
live in that big picture. Yeah, he
right,
delights in me, but you learn if he delights in me, he delights also in them. And you
exactly.
realize, we've talked about this before many times. We're ruined. We have been ruined for the ordinary, for the status quo, because we've seen the big picture from his point of view. And we are wild enough to actually believe it matters what one person decides. Now, again,
Absolutely.
you won't remain one. If one
Exactly.
person goes in, you'll become a door for many others. But like, we really do believe this. I mean, we live our life in this way with ourselves, with our families, with ministry, with, assignments, all of that. But I mean, we really believe this, don't we, Tina? We really believe this. And
Absolutely.
it compels us to go forward. So
Right.
talk a little bit, if you will, about what it means if the mountain is yours, the land is yours for the sake of what God is doing. But there are giants in the land, and they're going to have to be dispossessed, evicted, if you will, because they'll stay until somebody shows up and says, excuse me, you're going to have to get off this. It belongs to the Lord.
Exactly. So, I think one thing about education is I love education, right? I love the impact. I love the people, right? Education is a people business. This is one of the things that, I shared with my staff right out of the gate was, hey, we're not in necessarily, I hope this comes across right. One of the first things that I would share with my staff is that we're not in the product business, right? We're not Amazon. We're not like a shipping business. We're not, but what we are in the people business. We deal with people, right? We influence and impact lives on a daily basis, and what an absolute privilege, number one. And number two, you're dealing with families. My school's somewhere around 700 people, right? And
Yes.
so
So
700,
let's just say that about 700 students, how many on staff? So, I mean, literally, how many people, students
Well, I
and
mean, we're pushing right at 700 students, probably 90 to 100 staff members, right?
oh,
And then the families, of those students, right? Um, we are considered Title I school, right? So 100% Title I, which means economically disadvantaged, right?
mhm.
There are two private schools in our very, very small town that, pull from the public school. And so I have three elementary schools that feed into our school. Um, but, our demographics um, are not your typical school, right? And so, but these are our kids. These are the
That's
kids.
right.
These are the treasures that that the Lord has given us, right? This is our assignment, right? And so you're dealing with that. And so as you go into it, certainly, I'm an avid reader. I'm reading the latest research. I'm looking for strategies. I'm doing all of that, but one of the key things is that there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? And I believe as believers, right, as leaders who are followers of Christ, we have to know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is really, really good. I need knowledge, right? I need to have it. But the divine wisdom of God comes with how to actually use that knowledge, right? How do we use this knowledge? And the practical everyday ins and outs of what is required, right, of you as a leader and at a school. And so you're dealing with poverty, right? You're dealing with lots of things that were deep patterns that had been rooted, you know, at our school, um, a lot of opposition in a lot of different ways, right?
Well, and
One of
we've even talked about the deep, and this is everywhere, but specifically
certainly,
for
yeah,
your deep generational, cultural issues,
absolutely,
mindsets, all of that, and poverty is not just about I don't have money. Poverty is something that has a difficult time grasping real process,
right.
right?
And one of the biggest things that that you come across, and this is my story, and I'm sure that other people it's similar or maybe completely different. But one of the things that I quickly realized that that you come up against as someone that's on assignment, right, as a change agent, right, as somebody that I knew that I wasn't called to just go in and maintain. I knew I was not okay. I mean, who is okay with me in a D school? Like who, right? Who is okay with students not knowing how to read? Who is okay? Like nobody in education should be okay with that, right? And
Can't
so,
tolerate that. This is one of the great things about educators, as having been a teacher myself for 12 years. You go into your classroom when you're a teacher, and it's like this is my little world right here, right? And it's actually a good teacher to someone who has what we would oftentimes call pet peeves. It's like, look, I'm not going to be able to tolerate this. I
mhm,
cannot bear, right, that you don't know this when I know you're going to have to know it. And I'm compelled to make sure it's just not going to be okay that you don't know how to do this. You have
absolutely,
a deep belief that every child can learn. They may have
absolutely.
different ways of learning, right? Different styles, all of that. But you're compelled from deep within to make sure that opportunity abounds. This cannot be okay that they can't read or write or do what they need to do.
And we're not okay with it, right? And so one of the first things that I did, by the grace of God, was that I realized that there were several people on my staff at the time that really didn't believe that. They're like,
Mhm.
I mean, and the data showed it. It's like how can these kids be going backwards? Like this cannot happen, right? And having the courage, because a lot of times A lot of times people are saying, well, if you, what I refer to as help people find their happy place, like let's just move on to another area, right? If you do that, you're never ever going to find teachers. And, it's basically the subliminal message was, okay, you're just gonna have to put up with this. You're just gonna have to put up with
Just
mediocre.
to remain status quo. Just
Yeah,
maintain. Don't come in. And we'll come back to this in a minute. Don't be too optimistic. It's like, no,
exactly.
don't. We're not optimistic. We're
Don't
something. Yeah.
don't have too many
That's
expectations.
right. That
I've been
just
doing this for
calm down.
years. And also the mentality, because there was a high turnover in leadership there. Most people were only there maybe 1 to 2 years, right? And so part of it was just the feeling that this too shall pass. She's coming in all hyped up and has all this hope and expectation, but yeah, she'll get the message soon enough that this
That's
ain't gonna
right.
work here. you know
That's
and so one of the things was, I was like, I think we're gonna have to fire some people, right? And the audacity.
That was part of having the right people in the right place to carry
Yeah,
forward
yeah, absolutely.
the team building. Right.
It was a real struggle for me to make those decisions, right? And like I said, it was a struggle for a lot of reasons, because number one, you're dealing with people, but number two, people are telling you you're crazy. Like, you're not going to find teachers. Like, teachers are not going to come to this school. Have you seen your school? Nobody wants to work at this school. Nobody's going to this school, right? And so, but that first year, I released 17 people, like 17. It's like,
Wow.
yeah. And I started the year with a full staff, because that was, once again, the Lord reminded me, like, wherever I've placed you, I am your provision, right? And that's part of that wisdom, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Yeah, I'm facing the facts here, but at the same time, there's another level to that where I'm not operating out of my own bravado and my own whatever. Well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to, clean it. No, it's just like, this is
It
part.
wasn't, it wasn't heavy-handed. It
No,
was truly by this is what I've been sent here to do. This is a little bit of a mandate, if you
yeah,
will. I don't want to use
sure.
language that's too strong, but the mandate, and therefore this is what's going to be necessary, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes people decide to take themselves out
yeah,
because they realize, okay, wait a minute, there's a shift and change, and then some things you had to help, to bring change to. But that is a part of that courage of conviction, that part of saying, though this may be grievous, though this is not, I
very
really
difficult.
would rather not have to do this, but for the sake of what I'm here for, I'm going to need to make these decisions, and I'm going to need to
Very,
make
yeah,
this.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Some of the most grueling decisions.
That's
Some
right.
of the most
And it
weighty.
requires such mature communications to be able, and when you and I have talked about this, having the necessary nuance, finesse of mature communications, communicating, because this is very, very necessary. This is not personal. This is about the generations. This is about the children that we have, responsibility for. This is not just my preference or you. This is about something much bigger than just us.
Because we truly did believe that kids can learn, right, at high
No matter
levels,
what. That's right.
regardless of where you come from, regardless of who your parents are, regardless, I had a youth, my spiritual father, Tony Miller. I can remember him telling me at the age of 13, you can get anywhere in the world from Highway 27, Tina. And, Highway 27 is the road that runs right through my town. As a matter of fact, my school sits on Highway 27, right? So I literally remember that every day. And that is the message that we tell our kids. You can get anywhere in the world from Highway 27, right? And so one of the biggest things that I realize, that that our kids need, right? They need to know who they are. They need hope, right? They need hope, because a lot of times they're living in a place that um that they think that what they're facing today is what they're always going to face, right? And so I actually had someone recently ask me, so what are the, 3 things that you think your school needs, your kids need? And, you know, and and I've learned very quickly, it's not $1 million, even though I'll take it if somebody's donating, right?
Right.
It's not more programs. It's not any of that. Like our kids need hope, right?
That's
They need
right.
to know. They need to know who they are,
I think
right?
you restore ambition, proper ambition that a child actually begins to believe there's a reason why I'm here. There's a hope that's not just optimistic, it's filled with the life of God. When you speak and you say what he's saying, there's life that begins to permeate that. And sometimes, that can agitate a child who's without hope because they're like, don't mess with me. Don't try to come in here and, stir me up when it can't really happen. So you have to face the agitation that comes when you're sent on some level to help restore hope and proper ambition inside of them.
Yeah, and stay steady with that, right? And stay and just know, and at the same time, it's not a pipe dream. It's not hope, because with that hope has to come opportunities, and with that hope has to come plans. It has to, I mean, our kids need a plan, right? And we're part of that. We're part of helping them
Every
with
day.
that. We're helping them to see, this is how I look at it. I'm the light of the world, right? I get to light that path for them. I get to light that plan that is there, that's been there since the foundation of the world. Psalm 139 says that before we ever took a breath, that every single day of our life was written down. So what a privilege to help kids discover, what was written down. Of course, I don't say it exactly like this to them, right? But that you were born on purpose with a purpose, right? And so let's discover what that is for you, right? And that is these are the type of language and conversations that I have with my teachers, right? That I have with my staff, right? We don't try to
So,
make it anything other than what it really is, right?
what
So
I
yeah,
love is that
yes,
you,
we're teaching the core. Yes, I mean, we are teaching kids how to read, right? We're doing all of that, right? But in the midst of all of that, there is a hope, right? That's come to our campus. And so, 5 years later, I'm starting my 5th year. 5 years later, this year we are, Nancy and I were kind of joking about it earlier. One of our goals had been to hit a school grade of a 54, which for the last 4 years has been a B, right? To go from a D to a B.
yes.
This year we made 54. Woo! But guess what? They changed the scale. So
They moved the marker by
they
3
moved the
points.
bar. Man, we made the
But
bar, but they
But
moved the
you
bar.
know, you know, you did go from a D to a B school, even though technically you still had movement, D to a C plus. Thank you very much. This is the momentum. But listen, this is what I love. It's just like when I say when we preach or teach or whatever is when all the lights go out, when all the music has stopped, when all the, preaching, everything is, this is actually how we live. And when kids are watching you, okay, and you get done giving the speech or you bring the discipline or they watch you every day, 5 years, every day. Okay. And I'm telling you, that in and of itself starts to accomplish something. It builds a momentum. I can remember the first time I heard your spiritual father speak, Tony Miller, he talked about momentum, the importance of that movement that is consistent. It might not be at 75 miles an hour, but it's a momentum that keeps moving and it keeps moving. And when they see this, they understand that you did not just give up. It wasn't just 2 years and, oh, well, I'm off to something else. It's steady. And what does that speak to them of? The steadfastness of God. And if someone is believing, they might be able to believe themselves. I mean, this has got life inside of it. and is creating atmosphere. And I've told you this before. I just think you're such a high caliber, intentional leader. And the atmosphere, I believe, though I'm not saying this again in a hyped way, but it is supercharged with the presence of God in the most steadfast way. You're a very intentional leader. This is a part of what we need. And it is not just, everything just happens overnight. No, there's a compelling, I'm sent on assignment by God. There's a compelling within that causes me to move even through some of the most difficult, adverse, circumstances that would want to just shut you down, and you persevere because you know that God delights in you. You haven't compromised with the giants. You didn't negotiate with the giants, meaning so that they could stay, and you still look good. No, you're like, no, you're getting off this land.
Yeah. One of the things that the Lord just reminded me of, in Deuteronomy 7, it just says, when you go into this land, like, you cannot make covenant and agreement, right? With the giants that are in that land. Years ago, I haven't seen it as much so recently. There was a bumper sticker and it said coexist, right? I don't know if anybody ever saw it, but it said coexist.
I remember
and it kind of had every single religious symbol that you could have, right? And for some reason that always bothered me. I was like, coexist, like what? Like, choose one, right? And so it was very much, part of my own personal struggle, if you want to call it that. The challenge is that tendency, right? That, like I said earlier, people would say to me, it's not personal. I was like, well, you're not living it. It feels very personal, right? I'm in this, right?
They're using my name. Yeah, they're using my name when they talk about this. It feels personal.
Yeah. And so, but the issue is you can't, no matter what, you can't make friends, right? You cannot make friends with things that the Lord has clearly called, that right, is not of God, right? You cannot coexist with that, right? And we are not called. I think it's just very important that people know this. We're not called to coexist with darkness, right? We're not called to coexist with circumstances and situations that are actually, robbing people of life, and when I say that, once again, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it truly is. There are things that are sucking the very life,
Right. But see, you live in it, Tina. You live in it. You live on the cutting edge. You're not just a spectator that's like, oh yeah, I hear that there are difficult things happening. You literally live on the cutting edge every day in people's lives, families, teachers, all of that. So you're faced with it. This is a part of how I live because I'm really walking with people. I've had to face things in my own life. You realize, listen, there's a thin veneer, that we see this reality, but then when you pull that veneer back, you realize there's a whole nother reality where people are living. And when you face that, I remember one time I was the chairman of the board of a group and they were going to have a big party and do all this. And they knew I was a pastor at the time. This was many years ago. And they said, oh, Nancy, do you mind? Because we think, we're going to have, alcohol there or anything. I was like, okay. I'm not the deciding factor here, but they were attempting to be, to defer to me. And I said, like, oh, I know you don't drink or whatever. And I said, I really appreciate that. I said, but let me just give you this point of view. I said, in my line of work as a pastor, I see what happens after the party. I said, my issue isn't just about being a legalist or being a snob or self-righteous, well, I don't drink. It's like, no, it's just, I just wanted them to understand. I see what happens after the party.
Right.
when families are fighting and there's abuse and there's children crying and the police have been called and there's this and there's that, right? Not at everybody's house, but a lot of stuff goes on. And I said, and when that's what you face, you just tend to have a different point of view about things.
Exactly.
So you know what you're really facing, and you're having those conversations with parents and with students, hearing the anxiety, the depression, the gender confusion, all of these things that are happening that are stirring everything up. And when you live in the reality of that every day, you're like, listen, friends, I cannot compromise with these things. You may think they're this or this. They're literally tearing people apart. And I just cannot cooperate with things that are trying to destroy the people God has sent me in to help. Am I overstating it? Am I being dramatic?
No, no. I mean, that's exactly it, right? That, and that is the mandate that, that we have to stay in, that we have to live in, right? And you do that, but here's the thing, you do that. Like, I don't go in every single day with like, a sword drawn
That's right.
and, looking
We're
for
not living in doom and gloom because we have the
yeah.
Christ in us, but we are facing things that are pretty daunting.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and that is where, when you stay with the Father, that is where the hope and all of that can come in. And you just, there's so many times that, before I have to call a parent, before I have to have a hard conversation with somebody, I just literally close my door for a minute and say, okay, Lord, what are we gonna say here?
That's right. What are
How
we going to say about this?
how are we going to handle this, right, like what is this, right? Because yes, yes, I have the playbook, so to speak, right? I know the procedures, I know the protocol, right? But like I said before, that's your basic facts, that's your basic knowledge. Like I have, my heart is to bring online the wisdom of the Father, right?
Right.
The wisdom of the Lord, because he sees way beyond what
That's,
I'm looking at,
that's
right?
right.
And so, and yeah, and so in the midst of that, yes, there's been hardships, but yes, there has been so many, many beautiful things, that have come about, and so, we open our campus tomorrow with our teachers, and I couldn't be more excited. I can't wait to welcome them all back.
That's
I
right.
can't wait to have everybody
Yeah.
back, are we tired? Have we been working hard? Have we been done all? Yes, we have. Um, but it's a great joy, and it's a great honor and a privilege, to welcome our teachers back on campus, to welcome our students back pretty soon, our parents. And just knowing that, that the Lord has gone before us, right? That he's with us, right?
Well, and the fact that too, that all throughout the summer, I mean, this is a part of being a true leader, is sure you've had some vacation time, all of that, but the preparation, you're like, okay, last year is done. That was great. That was fantastic. You rest. Okay, now we got to completely go in, right? And it's in conferences and in all kinds of planning, everything going on, so that you can be that door opener, because you know the Lord in a very rich way, because you've had to enter in for yourself. A part of where our confidence comes from is like, look, if the Lord can deal with us and he can bring us through, our confidence, we say, we know what it is he can do. And we love opening the door for people. It doesn't mean we don't see the difficulties. We definitely come through accusation, intimidation. We come through a willingness to be misunderstood, so as to have the privilege of being the one who opens the door for others. And I know that by the time this conversation actually is posted, you'll already be a few days in with your teachers and with your staff, and you're going to be encouraging them, and you're going to be, getting ready to open the door again when all the students, begin to come, and parents, because that's a whole different rhythm.
Yeah.
One thing to be at the office with all the staff, but once the students begin to come in and that lifeblood begins to move through those hallways and those classrooms, and you face at a whole new level, going in again to say, here we go, Lord, here we go. Keep us steady, but keep us progressing. Again, not status quo, but to keep us progressing, because I want us to begin to get ready to close. And I know that we've talked about this many times before, that you don't want to take things personally, even though they may come at you, because the moment you decide that you're willing to take responsibility and to be an authority, everybody's kind of working out their authority issues on you. It's not personal, though. It's just, this is how they see authority. This is how they interact with authority. And you and I have talked about this many times, that we want to make sure we're fighting the right fight. We don't want to be fighting a fight like that's all about ourselves, to get beyond ourselves, to let the Father tend to us so that we can keep fighting, the right fight, which is to believe with Him for what it is that He's already written over Clewiston Middle School, over Tina Kelley, over every student, every staff member, every parent, every family, the whole community. There's a word He's written over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I say too, I would encourage, teachers, leaders,
Yes.
whatever role that you're in, because, probably one of the biggest challenges in your assignment, when you actually embrace it as an assignment, number one, is to embrace it as an assignment. Like, this is not just a job, right? This is my assignment. This is
That's right.
why I'm here. Because if it was just a job, I think we would all agree that, yeah, we could find an easier one somewhere, right?
Yes.
Um, but so number one is just embracing that as assignment. And number two, as you said, like, the willingness not to take things personally, right? Even though they truly are happening in the moment to you. I mean, you're in it, right? And
Right.
and so what that does in every new season of our life, right, is it deals with stuff in you, right? I mean, I love people, right?
Yes, you
I am a people person. I like having fun. I like being liked. I
I
mean, who doesn't,
know
right?
it. I know it.
And so it's like, and so a lot of times, that was one of the, and it still is. I'm not saying that I'm doing this perfectly, but that's one of the things. A lot of times you're like, you feel the need, and when you were talking about, like, referring to fighting the right fight, you feel the need that, wait a minute, but I've got to. No, this is a misunderstanding here. I've got to prove this. I've got to show that, no, that's not really how that happened. And da 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 da, and just give me a chance. And so a lot of times you find yourself really, if you're not careful, spending more time on that, right?
Right.
Than just really trusting that, God, you have me. And that's not like some cliche. It's like, Lord, I trust you. I know your voice, right? And I know your voice. I am very capable of hearing the Lord. And I'm going to trust you, Father,
Right.
uh, to deal with me, right, in ways that I need to be dealt with, but also just to deal with the whole, whatever that situation might be, right? The
That's
good
right.
and
So that you can stay focused on
exactly.
the real fight of continuing to make a way for others, to encourage them. I mean, to me, this is because, you always do win the most fun award. I mean, you are like the most fun. I mean, but you're also one of the most sober, intentional, I mean, serious. We oftentimes say we don't always take ourselves too seriously, but we take what the Lord is doing through us very, very seriously. And so that combination to me is so, so rich, is full of life, full of vigor, not pressed down and crushed, but literally the invigorating life. And this comes from really the abiding. I mean, we talk about this all the time on Tent Talk on the podcast, this Tent Talk here on YouTube, but is like, this is really real. And
Yeah.
you have talked many times, like, if this is not real and the Lord can't really do this, then what are we doing? I mean, what are we doing? Right. But we know that His ability, His willingness, His full provision, right, to literally cause us to live as he meant for us to live, as a real person on real assignment, all of that. But this deep, deep abiding, this is like the way to live. But someone has to be a living witness of him, so that we've got to have living witnesses. We can't just be learning about this. So I want to segue that into asking this very last question that I try to always remember to ask. I sometimes forget, but I want to ask this as we get ready to close out, is what is it that you think that we're not talking about, that we ought to be talking more about in any sphere, in any way? It might be referring back to something you and I've already talked about. It could be a future conversation that we have here. But what is it that we ought to be talking about more that we're not? Do you have any thoughts about that?
One of the things that comes to my mind is that, um, social media, right? We're on social media right now, right?
Right. Right.
Social media is an incredible tool.
Yes.
But a lot of times what's happening is, I've heard you say it before, we're getting discipled by somebody, right? Our kids are getting discipled by somebody. If we're not doing the discipling right, if we're not, then social media is discipling them, right? I mean, I can name a whole slew of programs, right? That
Yes.
we are constantly being bombarded, right, with messages, with messages, with messages, with words, with words, with words, with mindsets that are coming at you, and so, for our students, I think one of the things for our kids, one of the things that we need to talk about more is the voices that we are allowing to speak to our kids, the voices that we are allowing to form our kids. For the sake of, I don't know, being politically correct, keeping the peace, not ruffling anybody's feathers, not being called intolerant and all of these labels, right? So the people that are being sacrificed for all of that is our kids. It's our
Yes.
kids, right? And so I feel like one of the things that we need to talk about is that it's okay, um, uh, to number one, to address those issues with our students, to talk with our students, to open their eyes to the fact of all that's going on and all the voices that they're hearing and all of, sometimes the confusion that is causing, right? And all that kind of stuff. I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing that as educators, like I really want to, talk to our parents and our educators is a lot of times, be in the same vein, right? With social media, with whatever's hitting media, I mean, because we are so inundated with information all the time, um, you know, I mean, I can remember the day, like sometimes I open social media and, I read something and automatically I'm just like, oh my God, my heart is wrenched. And then, and it can stay with me a bit. Right. And then I think about, just a few short years ago, I would not even have known
That's
that
right.
this happened anyway. Let alone allow it to wreck my day,
Mhm.
right? Let alone allow it, to stay with me over and over again. And I'm not talking about not being empathetic, not being all that, but just being able to realize that, we're not made for everything that comes across, our
That's
phones
right.
and our social media,
That's
number
right.
one. But the other aspect of where I was going with that is a lot of times the message is that, you know what, you don't matter. You're just one person. What can you
What
do?
can you do? That's
What
right.
can you do?
Yeah.
Just go where you work and keep your head down, don't ruffle the feathers, and in reality, we need to realize that one person can do a lot, right? One person um can shift, right? A whole world. One person can shift the trajectory of another person's life. One person, as educators, we have we can shift the whole trajectory of a child's life just with one conversation, with by making that one connection. And these are things that if we're not careful, we're going to forget about that impact that we have, and we're going to become weary of all of the opposition, of all the stuff that's facing, and and we might just decide it's not worth the fight, right? We just might decide that we might need to choose a more comfortable lane. And so
No,
I just want to
no.
encourage you that we can't allow that, because we're not in this alone, number one, right? It's Christ in us, the hope of glory. And especially as followers of Christ, my gosh, what a powerful influence and impact you can have, just by showing up and being who you are, right? And so I just, those are things that are just really, really strong in my heart. And I just want to encourage our teachers, our educators, our principals, our parents, as we start this other year, this new year, like, don't go into it with, oh my gosh, what do I matter? I don't matter, but you do matter,
That's
right?
right.
And
Well, I mean,
your
just
words
like you
matter and
said,
your life matters, right?
yeah, the voices, how many voices are speaking to the kids? How many influences, how many things they're hearing that can create confusion? But, as adults, we're on our phones. We're as deep in things
Absolutely.
as kids are, right? And what voices are we listening to?
Exactly.
You know, because we are the influencers. And when that voice of the Lord is setting your path and your course, like he is with you, and steady as she goes, staying with that, but to be able to encourage others, be careful the voices that you listen to, be careful the influences, but to also remember that one voice can make a difference, right?
Right.
Right. And so the voices that influence me make a difference as to the influence that I carry with others. So I'm going to make note of that this is something we need to be talking more about, that we might not be talking about. So the only reason we're going to, stop, Tina, is because we have to, right? We've got many things that we could continue talking about, right? And part of that, what I love, is because life is in us, and we are on the cutting edge of our own learning curve, right? I mean, we may, I disciple people, I educate people, you educate people, all that, but that means we have to be the greatest learners of all. We have to continue growing, continue, depending upon him, and making sure that we are, as we often say here on Tent Talk, that we are the message that we bring. We don't
Absolutely.
have a message. We are that message, meaning we've allowed the Lord to work in us, to deal with us, and we are continuing to do that. And we just want to pass that life on. And it's important that there are living witnesses of him, not just people who I call eggheads, that just may have all the degrees and they've got all the intellect, but can they live? Can they live this way? You're living this every day, and you're a living witness of him. So I just want to say how glad I am that I got to share you with everybody. And thank you so much for the time that you've given to this, the thought that you gave to this, the willingness, and it won't be the last time. It will not be the last time. Because there are, multiple lanes that you're in. There are many other things that we could talk about, but we felt this would be timely for people as they are headed back into school and into those environments and into those challenges, that this would be a good time to be together. So everybody, thank you so, so much. I know that you have been able to hear something today that's provoking you under the big tent of God's presence, that literally these are not slogans. This is the way that we really live. So be sure to subscribe to our channel here. We would appreciate it so much. If there's anything that we can do for you, you just reach out to us at nancymccready.com. But I want to thank you for being here with us, and to make sure that if there's any question maybe that you might have for Tina, I would want you to be able to send those questions to me directly at nancymccready.com, and that then I would be able to pass those on to Tina and be able to share her public contact info where you could reach her in a way that would be good and appropriate. So if you have anything like that, then you be sure to contact us. This is a very relational work that we're all in. So we want to be as real, as open, and as available and accessible as we can be to provoke you to go forward with Him. So thank you so much, everybody, for being with us today here on Tent Talk. And we look forward to our next conversations together. All right. So Tina, thank you so, so much.
Thank you. It's an awesome privilege to be here. Thanks.